welcome to our Crazy Life Scotland. My name's Fiona, and in last week's video I spoke about the basics of using UV resin. So in this week's Craft and Chat video I thought I would look at epoxy resin. So today I'll go over the main differences between UV and epoxy resin. I'll just do a recap because I did that last week as well. I'm going to go over safety and what you need to get started, and then at the end we're going to make just very basic pendants using the same mould as we used last week with the UV resin. But we're going to make more than one this week because I want to show you different ways that you can cover it. So I do also want to apologise for any interruptions with my dogs playing. The little husky there is only 9 months old. He's been with us a couple of weeks now. But he won't leave the big Caucasian Shepherd alone. They're constantly playing. So apologies for any interruptions, but hopefully the fact they're so cute means that you'll give them a bit of a break. So first of all, a quick recap on the main differences between UV and epoxy resin. So as you would have seen, I'll link last week's video for you in case you missed it. But as you would have seen, UV resin is ready to go when you get it. You just basically unscrew it and you can squeeze it, pour it straight into your project. You don't need to mix it or anything. Whereas epoxy resin comes in 2 parts and you have to mix it very carefully, very slowly, and it can be a bit tedious, but it has to be done. That is how epoxy resin gets activated, if you like. So the other main difference is UV resin cures with UV light, as the name suggests. So you can use a UV torch, a UV lamp. If you're lucky enough to be in a very sunny country, the sun can actually cure it as well, although obviously it takes a lot longer. Whereas epoxy resin depends on heat and time to cure, which means it's a lot longer process than the UV resin. You do get some epoxies that are ready to demold in 4 to 6 hours. You do get things to help speed it along. I've got a heat mat that definitely helps to cure it a bit quicker. I have seen people using a resin curing machine as well, which looks fab. I might have to be saving up for that, but it depends on me being off Temu long enough, which isn't likely. So yeah, most epoxy resins, you need to wait until the next day before you can either add a new layer or unmold it. So that's the main differences between the two. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you around and show you what you need to get started with epoxy resin. Right, first things first, let's talk about safety. When you're using epoxy resin, safety is very, very important because it is toxic. And for that reason, you must wear gloves. If you do get it on your hands, it's extremely sticky for days. It's horrible and it can damage your skin. So please make sure you use gloves. I just got these off Amazon, but I'm sure you can get them in like local pharmacies, maybe even your big supermarkets as well. So gloves are very important, and I always have spare pairs beside me just in case. And the other thing is a good mask. Now, most people wear respirators, and if you're using epoxy resin every single day for hours at a time, I would highly recommend that as well. It is something that I want to invest in, but I haven't as of yet. So I just use these professional dust masks, and they do conform to professional standards. I don't really understand it all. I just got my husband to go online and get them for me because he knows the sort of things that I would need. And I always sit beside the window and have the window open as well. Just to be on the safe side, you really don't want to be breathing it in too much and you don't want to get it on your skin. So that is the safety aspect of it. I would also have some kind of covering on your work surface. I've got this silicone mat, which I always say isn't dirty, it's well used. And you might want to wear either old clothes or overalls or an apron as well. So that's what you need safety wise. Don't do anything until you've got them to hand. Then let's look at the epoxy resin itself. Now my preferred resin is JDiction, both the UV and the epoxy. It doesn't matter which one you use, everybody's got different preferences for different things. There are also different types of resins for different projects. You get deep pore resins if you're doing like really deep molds. I think you get tabletop resin if you're making like a tabletop, that sort of thing. But for today's purposes and for my purposes generally, I just use the normal epoxy resin by JDiction. If you're just getting started and you're wondering what one to buy, JDiction is amazing, but you do get less expensive resins out there, especially on the likes of Temu. My very first lot, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was from Amazon. And I would recommend, if you're not sure if you're going to stick it or if you think you're going to make a lot of mistakes at the beginning, which you will if you're anything like me, just get the cheap stuff to start off with. And then you can work up to the more expensive resins as you get more confident and you know you're going to enjoy it more. You do get it in different sizes as well, but all I could afford was this size this time, which is the 32 ounce, because there's 16 in each. Like most things though, the bigger volume you buy it in, the better value for money. So if you can afford the bigger ones, I would say go for it, because it costs less per ounce than it would buying it in this sort of size. You do get a smaller size than this as well in the JDiction. And I've just used the last of mine, so there it is there. That's the 8 ounce bottle, so it's a 16 ounce pack. And you will see that it comes in A and B. That's because you need to mix them together, as I said earlier, to activate it. Now, it's very important that you read the instructions on whatever resin you get, because some resins you mix 1 part of one with 2 parts of the other. And some it's by volume and some it's by weight. So for example, this one is a 1-to-1 by volume. So if you're going to use 50 mils of A, you need to use 50 mils of B. I've never used any that are by weight, but there are quite a few out there, so you would need scales if you're using that kind of resin. And if it was a 2-to-1, you would have, for example, 50 mils of one and 100 mils of the other. Just basic maths, but thankfully I've always used 1-to-1 by volume, so I've never had to do the quick maths. And all epoxy resins will tell you their main benefits. So this one's crystal clear, self-leveling, non-flammable, resists yellowing. Now that is if you're making something, for example, a wind chime or a sun catcher that's going to be in the sun quite a lot. Some resins do go a bit yellow over time, but the JDiction one claims to resist yellowing. I've not made anything like that, so I don't know personally. 40-minute work time. Now that is what I meant to say when I was going over the differences between the UV and the epoxy. Because UV resin cures with the UV lamps, you can basically spend hours with it before curing it, because the curing is up to you. It won't cure until you put it under the UV light, unless you're in a very, 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 very sunny place. However, epoxy resin, once you've mixed it together, you do have a short time to work with it, because it will start to go thick and start to cure slightly the longer it's been mixed together. So this claims to have a 40-minute work time. So something I would always advise is to have everything that you need to hand before you mix it, and that way you know you're giving yourself the most amount of time to actually play with it. And it says no VOCs and low odour, which basically means that it's relatively safe, but it's not. It's still epoxy resin. It is still harmful, and you do see the warning signs on the back, so I would pay attention to them. Now, resin A is your resin and resin B is your hardener. Resin A is thicker than resin B, and sometimes if it's cool you might want to put them in a bath of warm water, or just like a big jug of warm water, especially part A, because that's thicker. It does sometimes go a bit cloudy and looks a bit crystally, but if you put it in water, warm water, and heat it up, it should be a lot better. I'm not going to do that today because it's summer, apparently. It's still been raining a lot, but it is warm enough, so I don't need to give it a warm bath. So that's what you need to know about the epoxy resin. Other thing that you need is, whoops, you'll need some mixing cups. So because this is by volume, these 2 mixing cups came with it, but you can get like silicone mixing cups, which also have marks on them, so that you know where you are filling to. And what I normally do is, these are go up to 30 mils, so what I would normally do is I would take a Sharpie and mark whatever line I'm wanting to go up to. It just makes it easier, because it can be quite hard to see the actual markings on it when you're pouring. So that's what I do. Then once you've poured them separately, you need to mix them together. So you can mix them in a little silicone cup like this. I got nice inexpensive ones from Temu, my favourite shop. I am addicted online, and I am now a Temu influencer. I'm part of the Temu influencing program, which means that in any craft video that I make, you will find my Temu affiliate link and a discount code for new users in the description box. But anyway, we're going off topic here. So yeah, once you've poured them out, you need something to pour them into to mix them together. If you don't have anything like that, if you're just starting out, you can use a yogurt tub. You can use anything like that. And this you can either throw away when you're finished, or if you clean it out straight away, you can reuse it. And of course you will, once you put it into your little mixing cup, you will need to stir it. I have got a silicone stirrer here that came with one of my Let's Resin resins, and this is good because you can clean it easily. But if you don't have that, use a lollipop stick. Use anything that you don't need anymore. I also have super duper cool cocktail stirrers that I got off Amazon, so you can always use something like that to stir it as well. Just whatever you've got to hand, but make sure you do not use it for food again afterwards. So once you've got it all mixed together, you need something, if you're going to be using different colours, you need little tubs of some description to pour your epoxy into different cups for different colours. So again, you can use more of your little silicone cups. If you don't have anything like that, these are from the tops of like cornetto type cones. I keep them all the time, and yeah, they are round on the bottom, but if I just pop them in something like that, they're easy enough to use. They're really easy to clean out as well, so you can reuse them. However, you obviously don't get an awful lot in them, so that would be for smaller amounts. Again, if you're looking to make a bigger amount of one colour, you do get like massive big jug type things. Don't know if you can see that. You can use a different type of yogurt cup. Basically anything that you would normally put in the recycling. Just stop and think, can I use this for my resin? That's what I do all the time. Right, so once you've got them in the different cups for different colours, what are you going to colour them with? You have a choice. UV resin's slightly more limited, as I went over last week, but epoxy resin, pretty much anything goes in it, just as long as you don't put too much in. So glitters are amazing. You can get fine glitters, chunky glitters, any colour glitter, just amazing. I love using glitter in resin. You can also use mica powders that you can get online. I think these are JDiction ones as well, and they come in all sorts of colours, as you can see. But Temu also does mica powders, which are great. I've used a few of them and they work just the same, and they are a bit less expensive. What I would say is always check your nail art section. Sorry about them barking. Always check the nail art section, because these are nail powders and they're less expensive than mica powders. So anything like that, even if you've got old eyeshadow that you don't use anymore, you can crush that up and use it to colour it. When it comes to the likes of chameleon powders, which are powders like that which change colour according to the light, they are brilliant. It took me a while to pluck up the courage to use them, but they are fantastic. You do get them on Temu, but when you look at the value, you know, per gram, it's actually better value getting the likes of the Let's Resin chameleon powder pack. It's more of an outlay, but they last for ages. So if you're getting a chameleon powder, maybe even just get one from Temu to start. That's what I did. And once I realised how much I liked it, I went and got the Let's Resin ones. So that's the powders. And you can also use alcohol inks or pigments. So these are from Vista coloured pigments. I got a gold, a black, a white. I ran out of my white, so this one is actually from Temu. I've not tried it yet, this white pigment. But also alcohol inks. I was saying I don't think you can use them in UV resin, but they're great in epoxy. And I got this big box of 25 colours of alcohol ink from Amazon, I believe. So I will link that for you if you want. So you get loads of different colours of things like that. You can also use acrylic paint. And quite often what I do is I put the colour in the actual mould rather than the resin. So if you're going to do that, you want some kind of paintbrush, and especially with chameleon powders, I love to do that. Just a small amount. I'll show you that later on when we're making our pendants. And you can also use your acrylic paint in moulds and then add your resin. However, some moulds do repel it a bit and it can be quite difficult to get it to stick. I would always recommend some kind of dotty tool for actually putting your resin in the moulds and for making sure you get into all the little bits, all the nooks and crannies and corners. So I got a set of these from Temu. Again, I'll link it for you. And they've got the dotty bit on one side and the silicone tip on the other. And basically they are nail art again. Always look for nail art things before resin because it's so much less expensive. So yeah, I got a set of 5, I think, of these. And again, if you've not got that, improvise. You can use a lolly stick. Just don't use anything that's going to scratch your mould. These, although they are quite fine tipped, they're rounded, so they're not going to scratch your mould. Obviously, you don't want to lean too hard, but they won't really scratch your mould. The other thing that you're going to need once you've got everything in your mould is you want to get rid of any pesky bubbles. Bubbles are the bane of our lives when we're doing resin. So what you can do is usually you would wait a wee while and then you'll see the bubbles coming up to the surface. You can pop them either with your dotty tool, with a cocktail stick, but again, be careful not to actually scratch your mould with it. Or the most common ways are either alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, which I've just put in this bottle. Just give it a quick spray and it will help to disperse any bubbles. And failing all that, you can use a long neck lighter, but do not go too close to your mould because you can burn your mould and you can also make the resin actually stick to your mould. Bear with me, I'm being attacked by other dogs, hold on. Sorry about that. We've actually got 5 dogs and my daughter just let the weeest one out of her room, so she came running up to me looking for her breakfast. Where was I? I don't know if I mentioned much about moulds. A silicone mould is always a good thing if you're doing epoxy resin. You can do other things with it, but for the purposes of this video, I would suggest silicone moulds. Temu is the best place ever for silicone moulds because there's a huge variety and they are so much, I hate using the word cheaper, but they are. They're a lot better value for money than the Amazon ones. You get exactly the same ones on Amazon for double, maybe triple the price of Temu. So yeah, you need a silicone mould. And some of them are designed specifically for epoxy resin. Some of them are meant for chocolate or fondant, but you can still use them. Some of them are, recently I've been seeing a lot of freshy moulds and I'm thinking, what's a freshy mould? But it's for using like scented beads to make air fresheners and for cars and things. And I believe you can use them, but you just don't need to fill them to the top because they're quite deep moulds. So that's the main sort of types of moulds. And the other good thing to have is any inclusions. You might want to put in stickers or tattoos or like temporary tattoos. Nail art, again, nail art stickers, nail art charms are brilliant. You can basically put pretty much anything in resin. I've seen a lot of people doing like ocean themes and they put proper sand in. Crushed glass is really good. What else? Little beads. Basically anything glittery, anything shiny, I just chuck in. It's all a matter of experiment. That's what I would say. Definitely experiment a lot in the beginning to see what works for you and what doesn't. And finally, what you need is something to clean up with. Baby wipes are always good to have on hand. Kitchen roll or kitchen towel, as some people call it, is very good to have. I'm terrible. I shake a lot and I spill things all the time, so I always need to have things like that to hand. And then for cleaning your pots at the end, I will talk about that, but some alcohol is really good. The other thing I would recommend having on hand, especially for cleanup, is, sorry, I just knocked you, is little micro brushes like them or cotton buds. They're really good for if you've got like an over pour on your mould. If you pour too much in, you can use them and they kind of soak up, or kitchen roll will soak up any excess. These are really good for getting into tiny spaces, so especially if you've brushed chameleon powder in and it's gone on a bit you don't want it to, you can either use it dry or I spritz a bit of alcohol on it and then use it to take it away. So things like that. These are cheap as chips, less than £1 for 100 from Temu. And the same with cotton buds, really, really inexpensive. Now, what I will say is that seems like an awful lot of things that you need, because you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to cost a fortune to start up. But I've been doing this for about 1.5 years now, and I've built all this up over time. You don't need all of this to start with. As long as you've got your resin, something to mix it in, a mould, and some kind of colouring, whether it's glitter, it can be any glitter. If your kids use glitter, borrow that from them. Anything like that. Nail powder. Yeah, I suppose nail powder if you do nail art. Right, Willa? Eyeshadow, break up some eyeshadow, anything like that. Just get creative. Don't go out and spend a fortune. I mean, the alcohol inks, I didn't get them until I'd been doing resin for about 1 year. Because I was enjoying playing with the mica powders and the nail powders and that sort of thing. So you don't feel that you need to go out and rush and buy everything at once, because that would be extremely expensive. That's why I'm showing you like improvised things. If you don't have the silicone cups, just use things that you've got around the house. But like I said, do not use them for food again, and do not scrimp on your safety. Make sure you're always at least wearing gloves and some kind of mask and have a window open. Right, I do believe that's me covered everything that you need to get started. If not, please do leave a question in the comments below even. I just remembered the other thing I was going to say about the mould is I would always have extra moulds on hand, just in case you make up too much resin, you don't want to waste it. So I've always got other moulds sitting at the side of me. And for example, this mould has got leftover resin from another project in it. So this is ready to get more resin added. So if I make too much, I can add it to this. Just have any moulds that you've got to hand. So now for the fun bit. I'm actually going to start using the epoxy resin and showing you how to mix it and what to do with it. But for that, I'm going to do a voiceover because I will have my gloves and my mask on, so I will sound a bit muffled. So I'm going to get all safetied up and I will show you how to mix the resin. Because these are brand new bottles, I'm just going to start by taking the lid off and breaking the seals. I had gloves on, so I was happy just to poke my finger through, but you could just use anything sharp to poke it through. I then do the same again with part A. Now both bottles are open, I'm just going to put a mark on my measuring cup where I want to fill to. It just makes it a lot easier when you're actually pouring it to see where to stop. So I do that on both measuring cups, making sure that I have them both at the same volume because it's 1 to 1. I always mark on the bottom as well, A or B, and that way if I need to mix up any more resin in the one sitting, I know which cup to use for which one. Now it's time to start pouring. I always start with part B because it's thinner than A, and that way when you add A to B, they start mixing together straight away before you even do anything. But it doesn't matter which order you do it in, it's entirely up to you. So I'm just pouring it up to the line. I'm keeping a track of where it's going and trying to be as accurate as possible. I always make sure that I replace the lid after pouring each part because I'm terrible for knocking things over. Now I'm going to put my measured amount of part B into my mixing silicone jug, and I just use my little stirry tool to make sure we get every bit of it out as much as you can. We don't want to waste a drop of resin because it can be pricey. Then it's time to measure out part A. I just do exactly the same again. It's not overly clear here, but part A is thicker than part B. So again, I'm going to fill it up to my little Sharpie line. Make sure I put the lid back on. Then I'm going to add part A to part B in my mixing jug, and this is where the magic begins. Whatever chemical reaction it is that takes place starts pretty much straight away. Because A is thicker, as I said earlier, it already starts to merge in with part B. I don't know if you need to do it that way. I don't think you do, but I saw that tip and I do it that way now. Now for the stirring. I'm just showing you there that you can't really see it, but part A is merging with part B. So now we're going to stir it. You want to stir it slowly, very slowly, and you want to go in 2 different directions, just whatever it takes to make sure it all gets mixed together. You want to make sure that you scrape the sides and the bottom so that you're getting every single bit. You want it all to be mixed up properly. The reason we stir slowly is to try to introduce as few bubbles as possible. And I'm showing you here, trying not to keep putting your stirrer in and out because that introduces more bubbles. Try to keep your stirrer actually in the resin all the time. Now, most resins say to stir for 3 to 4 minutes. I usually do it 5 to 6 minutes just to be on the safe side. And I make sure I've got a YouTube video or something to watch in the meantime because it can get a bit tedious. But it's a very important stage. If you don't mix your resin properly, you're not going to get a decent piece. So it's definitely worthwhile taking the time to do it properly. Right, I'm going to speed the rest of this up for you. That's it fully mixed, so I'm going to pour it into some separate cups. I think it was maybe 4 or 5, so that I can put different colours in each one. Again, I'll speed this up for you. I basically just put the same amount, or roughly the same amount of resin in each pot. Oh, one thing I should have said at the beginning that's handy to have is some sticky tape, like parcel tape or masking tape. It's really good for cleaning your moulds. So it's always a good idea to go in and clean your moulds before you actually pour your resin. Even if they look clean, there could be little crumbs or hairs or ooze or anything like that in them. And especially in this house, there's hairs everywhere. So definitely just take a couple of minutes to roll up some sticky tape and make sure that it's all clean. Right, so once my mould is clean, I want to pour my clear mixed resin into separate little cups so that I can put different colours in them. And I just eyeball it. It doesn't matter how much you use, just however much you think you're going to need of each colour. I just randomly pour the clear in, and then it's ready for me to add different types of colourings to. Here I'm just laying out the different things that I'm going to use to colour each one. It's the way that I do it. Everybody finds their own way of doing it. I just like to have it all lined up so I know exactly what colours I'm going to be using, whether it's mica powder, glitter, that sort of thing. And in the very first one, I decide that I want to try to recreate the one that we made out of the UV resin last week. So I want some just clear resin, some gold glitter resin, some mica gold resin, and then some with gold foil in it. So I'm just going to add some gold mica powder just now. This one is from Temu, and it's it's great. It's very metallic. It's really, really good. So I'm just using the end of a lolly stick. You can use a wee spoon. You can use anything that you want. And you want a relatively high amount, but just bear in mind the amount of resin that you've actually got in your cup. You don't want to overwhelm it and put way too much in. It's easier to add than to take away. So I'm putting the lid back on it so I don't spill it. And I'm just about to go in with the glitter into the other one now. And I'm using the other end of the lolly stick, I think. And I'm just popping the glitter into the other cup. Because I'm not putting anything else in to colour it, the resin's going to stay clear. So I do use quite a lot of glitter, and I actually used the last of that gold glitter, which is a shame because I really liked it and I can't remember where I got it from. Now for more mixing, I'm going to carefully mix the gold mica powder in with the resin in this one. Again, just be careful not to introduce too many bubbles at this point. And you can see it goes a little bit thicker because of the amount of mica powder that's in there. But don't worry about that. That happens when you add stuff to resin, it does make it a bit thicker. Once that one's mixed, I'm just grabbing a clean dotty silicone tool type thing, and I'm going to stir the one with the glitter. And you'll see what I mean about the glitter's lovely, but the resin's still clear, so it's still quite translucent. Again, just mix it quite carefully. If you've not got more than one dotty tool, you can just wipe it off with baby wipes in between. Now I've got my tub with just the clear resin, and I want to add a very small amount of that to the top of the pendant, just like I did in the UV resin one last week. I'm not very good at pouring slowly, so I use my little tool basically just to scrape bits out of the pot into the actual mould, because if I start pouring, it all ends up going in. Right, so that's about enough. Now I'm going to take my tub of gold glitter, and unlike the UV one last week, we weren't able to cure it in between, so they are going to merge slightly, and that's another reason to have it all mixed up before you actually start, so that they don't have a chance to mix together too much. So the gold's going in, and you can see that there is still a bit of separation between the clear and the gold. And now I'm ready to go in with the gold mica powder one. I just give it another little mix because it has been sitting. And again, I'm using my little dotty tool to help me get a good amount in. I don't want to go too over the top. I do want to try to keep them as separate as possible. And that's now the first three colours in there. Now I'm just using my little tool to make sure that all of the resin is right at the corners, right in at the edges. It does self-level, but it's a good way to make sure there's no bubbles in there as well. Now I've got another pot of clear resin, and I'm going to add to that some of the same gold foil that I used in the UV one last week. It's quite awkward with your gloves to try to get lids off and things, but persevere. There we go. And I'm just going to take a little pinch of it. You don't need a lot at all. Dropping bits in one at a time and then deciding whether that's enough. And when I think I've got enough in, I just start to give it a mix together. So using a clear tool, I'm just going in, mixing the foil in and making sure that the foil breaks up, because it was in sort of one big piece, but it breaks up quite nicely when you're mixing it in with the resin. So I just give it a good mix until I'm sure that I'm happy with it. Apologies that my hands are in the way, but at this point what I'm doing is I'm basically just pouring some of the resin with the foil all over the pendant. It is going to merge in with all of the other layers, but that's fine, that's what I'm wanting it to do. So hopefully you can see that now. I've got a clear layer, the glitter layer, the mica layer, and then I've topped it with the gold foil layer. Now that I'm finished with the gold, I can put my spare resin into the other moulds that I've got sitting. So here I'm just adding the gold mica powder one to my little Mickey Mouse head, and just making sure that gets a good covering. I think there's enough in there, so I just give it a little squeeze, make sure it's in all of the edges, and then I'm going to use my dotty tool just to make sure there's no bubbles or anything at all the edges, and I just quickly go around it all. Make sure it's in all the nooks and crannies, because bear in mind there are the little stripes inside this one. Once I'm happy with that, I just very carefully put it to the side, and I'm going to think about what I'm doing next. I decided to use the little parcel mould that I showed you earlier from Temu, and I'm going to go into all of them with some gold glitter first. The smallest one I filled to the top with the gold glitter. The others I just put a small amount in. And the reason I'm doing that is A, I've not got an awful lot of it left, and B, I want to add some of the mica powder one to them as well, so that the two of them merge. But what I want to do first is use my dotty tool, because there's lots of little spaces in there to make sure the resin gets into properly. And I made a little bit of space here, so I'm just topping that up a bit. So I'm doing the same with this one. This one isn't totally filled, but I still want to make sure all of the resin is in all of the little spaces. I'm just going round them all and doing that. Then a little squish and a squeeze. I always find that that helps to get into any of the little spaces as well. And now I'm going in with the gold mica one to top up the ones that have still got space in them. Just take your time so that you don't get too much over poured. A little bit at a time is fine. I'm not using my tool this time because there's not as much left. It's not going to come out as quickly. So I trust myself. So I'm just popping that into the three that have got space left in them. And I'm getting low on the resin in here, but there's enough to do it, so that's fine. I'm quite happy. Another little squish and a squeeze. Then that one's ready to be put to the side. I'm finished with the golds, so I get my chameleon powder out, and I absolutely love this. I love the fact that it changes colour depending on the light. And this time, rather than mixing it in with the resin, I'm going to paint the mica powder directly onto the mould. Now this can be messy stuff, it can fly about in the air, so just be careful. I'll put you in a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm basically just like painting, but it's with powder. Just take a wee bit on your brush and then start filling in the mould with it. And I decide to leave the very top bit clear so that there's a bit of contrast in the pendant. But you could always fill it right up with the chameleon powder. You could use different coloured chameleon powders. It's entirely up to you. I'm just cleaning my brush here with a dry bit of kitchen roll just to make sure that there's no leftover chameleon powder on it. I don't want to make it wet and then all the powder sticks to the brush. So it's now nail powders that I'm going to go in with, and I'm just trying to decide what colour I want. And I think I like that blue. The nail powders are quite fiddly because they've got cling film over them, but I just burst a little hole in it and then put my brush in through the little hole. So I'm going to go in to this pendant now, and I think I'm going to use a couple of different colours. So I'm going to do all the bits that I want this nice blue first. Then I have a look to choose my next colour, see which one I fancy. And I settle on a nice silver colour. So I just put that in the top of the mould where I didn't put the blue. I do apologise for the dogs. I'm happy with how that looks. At that point, I discovered that I have knocked over one of the pots of resin. I told you I always knock things over. I've not got great sensation in my arms and legs, so I don't even feel myself doing it. And I don't try to salvage any of this. I basically just take a baby wipe and put as much of it back into the cup as I can, and then I put that in the bin, which will then be securely fastened so the dogs can't get into it. I'd like to say I did it on purpose to show you how to deal with it, but I didn't. Right, back to the matter in hand, and I take a cup that has still got resin in it and decide what colour I'm going to add to it this time. So I get my black pigment out because dark resin makes the chameleon powders really pop. So I decide that I'm going to add some black pigment. Now, pigment is very, very concentrated, so you only need a tiny, tiny little drop. I then take a clean tool and give it a stir. Watch how black it goes. Look at that. So quickly it just goes completely black. And if you do add too much pigment, your resin won't cure properly, so you do need to be careful. Right, I'm now just going to pour that into the first one that we coloured with the chameleon powders. And I'm making sure that I go right round the outsides of it. And I think it's going to be nice to have the black at the top where there's no chameleon powder. So once I'm sure that I've got relatively the right amount in, I'm just going to go in with my dotty tool to make sure that it's managing to run at the very narrow parts, because sometimes it will sort of block itself and take a little while to get into all the little nooks and crannies. So it's good to give it a helping hand, and once you open the channel for it, it does tend to keep flowing. So you can see me just squeezing my little tool in there to make sure there's enough space for the resin to go right round. Then I'm going to use the same resin in the other one. It'll be interesting to see the difference between the chameleon powder and the nail powder with the black resin. So that's why I decided to do that. And again, I'm just pouring it straight in, making sure it gets into all of the edges. When you've dusted your moulds, you don't want to go in too much with any tools, because if it disturbs the mica or the nail powder, whatever it is, so it can sort of swim about in the resin and it doesn't give the same effect. Now the first one's had a chance to settle. I'm just going in with a little bit more resin. Once it self-levels and gets into all the little bits, it can need a bit of a top up. So that's just what I'm doing there. Now I've still got a small amount of black and a small amount of the clear resin with the gold foil in it. So I've decided just to mix them together and see what kind of effect we get with that. I just love experimenting. You can't do anything wrong, really. The worst that can happen is a piece doesn't look good and has to go in the bin. But generally, just go for it. Just give it a try. Experiment. Now going to give it a little stirry, mix it all together, make sure the foil is nice and well dispersed through it all. And you can see it's still very black, even though I've added more clear resin to it. And I decided to put it in one of the little areas that I've not put any powder or anything in. It's just a little blank part of the mould. And yeah, we'll see what kind of effect we get with that once it's time to unmould it. I'm fitting in as much as I can so I'm not wasting my resin. Just giving that tool a wipe down because the black does stain everything. So I like to try to clean those ones as soon as possible. Now I've got my remaining pot of clear resin and I'm going to add some alcohol ink this time. So I'm going to add this lovely sky blue colour. You need a little bit more alcohol ink than you do pigment, but again, just don't go OTT. It's easier to add than it is to take away. So I put maybe about 6 or 7 drops in and then give it a stir and see what I think of it. I'm speeding this up, I'm not stirring it that fast. I've still got some of the gold glitter resin left, so I decided to put some of that in the top of this pendant. Sorry about my hand being in the way, but you know what I'm doing. So it was just a wee bit to fill the top of it, just to give it a bit of contrast with the other colour that's going in. And again, because it's epoxy and not UV, it's not been cured in between, so there will be a little bit of mixing, which is fine. So I'm just going in with my blue alcohol ink resin in the bottom and I will let them mix together as they want to. I have still got some of the blue alcohol ink resin left, so I decided to add some nice blue mica powder to it as well. I don't want to add too much because I have already added the alcohol ink, so I just kind of go with it. Just a small amount at a time. I'll give it a stir and see what I think. Once I'm happy with it, I pour it into another spare bit in the mould, another pendant shape. Just a small one because I've not got an awful lot left and I do want to do something else with the leftover resin of this one. You can see that I've filled that one 3/4 of the way up. I've left the top blank just now because I'm going to add some nice glitter to this resin and I'll pop that in the top to see if we can still get a contrast or if it all mixes together in the time that it takes to cure it. So in we go with the blue glitter. Again, I don't measure it, I just put some in and see how it goes. Maybe a little bit too much, but hey ho. Give it a little stir. If you do add too much of something to your resin, you can add more resin to dilute it down a bit, if you know what I mean. So it's not a disaster, but I try to add smaller amounts and then add more if I need it. So this is me just going in to the top of that pendant with the glittery one now, and my hand's in the way again. I'm going to have to try and figure out a better way of filming. Then I'm using my dotty tool just to make sure it's in all the edges, that it's going round the little knobbly bit that makes the hole for the pendant. and I'm going to add a little bit more here. And I'm pleased to have some left because I have got my little wolf keyring mould here that I've already filled the details in with UV resin, and I want to fill the sort of main part of it in with a nice blue epoxy. So I thought, try and have some left over and then go in with that. It might not be enough, but I give it a go and hope for the best. So I've scraped as much resin as I can out of the mold, out of the cup into the mould. And I'm going to use my stick just to sort of help it to level itself out and make sure that it gets into all the little bits. Actually, it's a dotty tool that I use. And I just make sure it's all covered. It doesn't fill the mould right up, which is fine because I know that I'm going to go in and probably add more resin to it later anyway. I just want to make sure that there is an even coating on it so that it's all covered with the blue before I add another colour later on. And again, going into all the edges, try to make sure there's no bubbles. And I am happy with that. 2 thumbs up. Now, I want to make sure there's no bubbles anywhere. The ones that I poured earlier have had plenty of time to settle, let bubbles come to the surface. I decide not to go in with the alcohol spray though because the moulds are quite full and I don't want them to overflow. So I just go in with a long neck lighter, just nice and quickly over each one, paying attention to any bubbles that may pop and any bubbles that are still needing to pop. If there are any, you can use like a cocktail stick, toothpick type thing, but in this case, the flame was enough just to make sure there wasn't any bubbles there. Now it's time to put everything aside to cure overnight. If you can cover them with something to stop any bits of hair or dust or things getting in them. But if not, don't worry about it. I tend not to cover them. I've got 5 dogs and we don't get too many hairs on them, so it's up to you. Then for the cleanup. Basically anything that's meant to be single use or like disposable that's not silicone, I would clean there and then as soon as I'm finished using it. First of all, I'm going to get a clean bit of kitchen roll and I'm going to use that to scoop out any of the resin that's left inside, and there will be very little, believe me. I use it all. Then I take my alcohol spray and spray just a small amount of alcohol into the bottom of it and give it a little swirl around just so that it gets any bits of resin, and I'll leave it there for a wee while just to sort of let it soak in, if you like. I'm putting away my alcohol inks, making sure lids are on everything as well. When it comes to the silicone things, the silicone stirrer, I just leave that overnight. I'll show you what I do with that in the morning. But the likes of the dotty tools, I always clean with a baby wipe because the resin doesn't come off them very easily once they're cured. So I give that a wipe down, and I do the same with the lolly sticks, and that way they can be reused as well. You don't need to use a different one every time. When it comes to the brush that I've used for the powders, I like to give that a clean with the baby wipe first off, and if I think there's maybe any resin or anything got in it, what I will do is I'll take a clean cup that's not got anything in it, just put some alcohol in the bottom of it, and then dip my brush in and give it a good sort of squeeze around, make sure that it's as clean as it can be. And it's amazing what comes off it that you'd think you've already cleaned it, but yeah, it's amazing how dirty it can actually be. So I do that and then I just leave that to dry overnight. Then I go back to the cup that had resin in it and that I sprayed the alcohol in, and I'll give that a good rub round with a bit of kitchen roll or a baby wipe, depending how much resin was actually in there. I'll make sure it's lovely and clean, and if it's wet, I'll dry it off with a paper towel as well, some kitchen roll. Any silicone pots or cups that have got mixed resin in it just gets left overnight, and I will show you in the morning what I do with them. Good morning. It is almost time for unmoulding because it's the next day. But first of all, I just wanted to show you, sorry about the dogs, how easy it is to clean up anything that had resin left over in it overnight. I usually just leave the silicone things with resin in them because they're so easy to clean. The things that I did clean yesterday are the little measuring cups, and that is completely clean, completely not sticky And I've got A somewhere as well. I don't know where it's gone. But yeah, that's perfectly clean now, so that can be reused. If I had left that until today, it would probably have been a sticky mess because it wasn't mixed, it was just one part of the resin. So I always, whatever I measure in, I always clear out the same day. Let's have a look at our brush. I dabbed that in some alcohol and basically just gave it as good a clean as I could, and it's perfectly soft, ready to use again. I did the same with the silicone brush because although the resin will come off the silicone bit, it doesn't come off the rest, as I discovered. Where is it? Hold on. One day I left this dotting tool in resin and look, it is now stuck. That is actually one of the dots, but a thinner one, and that bit of resin is completely stuck. I've not thrown it out because I can still use that end, but yeah, you need to remember if it's not silicone, you need to clean it. Here's our little stirry stick, and if I just give this a bit of a bend, I actually love doing this because I love picking things, and you just get it started and the resin peels off like that. Now you will notice I'm not wearing gloves, and that is because the resin is now cured, so it's not dangerous. If it was still a bit soft, I would wear gloves, but at the moment it's fine. So that you just keep picking away and you'll get it nice and clean. If you're needing to at the end, you can use some sticky tape to take off any little bits and maybe some alcohol, but generally that cleans fine. Now what I want to show you before I do this is this little tub of goodies. This is all bits of resin that I have peeled off things the next day. I don't throw them away. I've not used them for anything yet, but you just never know. You never know. So I always have a little tub handy. So for bits like this, they just pop in there. Right, now our silicone cups, I will just use this one as an example. That is all nice and cured, and I can just basically peel the bits of resin out of there. So any big bits on the bottom come out no problem, and I put them in my little dish. Then I turn it outside in. Just be careful because bits of cured resin might go flying like that. And having it over my spare tub, I just do that. For any of the bits that are worth keeping, any small bits I don't worry about. And then for bits like that that are left, just get some masking tape or some sticky tape of some description. And look at that. It comes off so easy, and before you know it, your silicone cup is as good as new. So that's how easy it is to do the cleanup. I didn't know all that when I first started, and oh, I made some messes. But there we go, simple as that. I'll do the others off camera. I just wanted to let you see how easy it was. And of course, your silicone mat, if you've got any bits like that, they simply peel off and go in your tub. Like that. I did see a tip on someone's channel. I can't remember who she was. I think, was she Italian maybe? And she was doing the Christmas in July as well. And she gave me the tip that when your silicone mat gets a bit grubby like this, apparently WD-40 is brilliant for taking it off. Just give it a spray and then a good scrub. I've never got any WD-40 yet, but I'm definitely going to keep that idea in mind. Right, now to the good part. My favourite part of the resin process is, of course, unmoulding. Now, it's my favourite part because I love to see what I've created, but I always get that sort of nervous, anxious feeling because you never know whether it's going to have turned out nice or horrible. Resin's one of those things that you very rarely get the same result twice. So I do enjoy it, but I get a bit, whoa, hope it's okay. Not that it would be a huge deal if it wasn't. Let's just get into it. Let's do this one first. This one looks lovely. That's the back and the front. Oh, I like that. Can you see that? I love that. Do you know what would be really nice in that is some sort of picture, maybe nail art glitter or a nail art sticker or something in there. I might look at doing that. But that's lovely. And of course you've got your hole there, so you can put either a chain through it or a cord or whatever you wanted. It could even be a key ring, but something as delicate and glittery as that, I think I would probably make a necklace. I decided to add a couple of temporary tattoos. So there's a butterfly and there is like a fern flower type thing there as well that you can't see very well on camera, but you can see it in real life. And because it was clear, it was hard to see. So I just put a bit of white UV resin on the back just to help it stand out a bit. And then I just domed the top of it with some UV resin. And that is how the final piece has turned out. Now this is the one that we tried to recreate from the UV resin. Now obviously it was different because with the UV resin we could set each part at a time so they didn't all mix into each other. But let's see what has happened with this one. That is the back and that's the front. I like that. I like that. I can't remember what I've done with last week, so I was going to put a comparison up. If I find it, it's somewhere safe. If I find it, I'll put a picture up. But isn't that gorgeous? That's so nice. So that was some clear resin, resin with gold glitter, resin with gold mica, and then we put some of the resin with the gold foil over it as well. I really like that. Let's have a look at this one. This one was, I think this was blue alcohol ink, blue mica and blue glitter, I think. Oh, that is gorgeous. Hope you can see that without the glare of the ring light. That's actually got quite a lot. Oh, was that nail glitter maybe? Nail powder? No, it was glitter. I like that. That is lovely. And I love the shape as well. It's so delicate. Right, now this I think was chameleon powder, and we dusted the mould with the chameleon powder and then added the black resin. So obviously that's it at the back. You can see some of the mica powder does come up, and if we turn it over, look how nice. That's chameleon, so it changes. That's green in my eyes anyway, maybe not in the camera. Purple. And I left that bit there clear, so it's just the black that you see. Oh, I really like that. And of course you can leave them like that, or you can dome them with a layer of UV resin. I might do that with one of them just to let you see the difference. This one here was the nail powders and then the black resin. So let's have a look and see. This is the back again. You can see where some of the nail powders have moved about. And ooh, it's nice. I don't know what's going on down here. There's like a different colour somehow. I do like the idea though. The nail powders definitely work. They're nice and sparkly. Not sure. That looks gold. I maybe dripped some gold in there. Or did I put gold in? Oh, I can't remember. I'll need to look back the video. It's nice though. I like that. And again, you could put, if you're not keen on that bit, you could put a sticker or a transfer or something on it just to cover it up, maybe even some little gems, something like that. But that's gorgeous. And again, a key ring or a pendant. This piece was giving me Christmas vibes. So what I ended up doing was I put a thin layer of UV resin over and put some iridescent stars in at the bottom, and then I put the little snowman and the little Christmas tree. That's nail art gems. They're 3D, like little metal gems, and I then just domed the rest of it with some UV resin, and I love that. I think that's could either be part of a Christmas decoration, like a tree decoration, or it could be one just on its own. Oh, you can see the wee stars there. Or a Christmas keyring. I put Merry Christmas on it. I love that. Now, what did we do with this? I can't remember. Let's just take it out and see. Was this just black? I don't think so. Ah, that's right. I mixed the black with the rest of the clear with gold foil, and that's turned out lovely as well. I think what I might do, I might dome this one to let you see what it's like. So this is it before, and I'll pop in a picture of it after now. So this is what it looks like when it's domed with UV resin. It's a lot shinier and it's just got a nicer finish. So that's all the things that we made together, but a bit of bonus unmoulding. With the spare resin, I did make some other things, remember? So this was just the clear resin with the gold foil, the little gift. That's a Temu mould and I love it. You can actually use acrylic paint or nail polish to highlight the bow. And I think this was half the foils and half mica. Not my favourite, it's a bit dark, but maybe if I put some silver or red or something in the details there. Can't remember what this was, I think I was just topping them up. Yeah, again, not my favourite, it's too dark, but I'll use them for something. I always do. And this one, that's a bit better because it's bigger and you can see the gold glitter more on the top. Yeah, they're fine, and look how clean that mould comes out. You don't need to do a thing with it. I really do like Temu moulds. And then I had my little Mickey Mouse head, which already had the white resin in the sort of spirals. This is meant to be like the candy cane, but I've done it as candy cane quite a lot, so I wanted to do a bit different. So I added the gold that was left over, and look, how cute is that? A little bit over pour there. That is really nice. It's a wee bit streaky down there, I'm not sure why, but I like that. And again, there's a couple of little bubbles around there. You could dome it, you could add UV resin to just the white bits or just the gold bits, or you can leave it just as it is. I just think that's lovely. In the end, I did decide to dome it, but I'm not keen on it like that. I think I preferred it just the way that it was. It's okay, but yeah, it's not my favourite. Maybe if it was the traditional red and white, it would look better, but that will go in my reject bin, I think. And finally, my wolf. This is a gorgeous keyring, and for the first time I had tried doing the start in UV resin, and then I added it was the blue with the mica powder or glitter, I can't remember which one it was, and it wasn't full enough, so I left it to cure on my heat mat and went back to it a couple of hours later and just added some black resin. So let's see how this looks. I have got no idea, I've only made this a couple of times and I've done it different every time. Are we ready? Oh, I love it. I love it. A wee bit over pour there, I can fix that. If you do get over pour, most of the time, if it's a little bit, you can just scrape it off with your hands, especially if it's quite soon after pouring. If not, you can use a blade or a deburring tool, but I love that. That's going to be for me, this one, because I've not made one since we got Hades the Husky, who is still tormenting Hugo the Caucasian Shepherd as we speak. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, do I like the matte background, or do I want to put some UV resin on it to make it shiny? You know, I think I like it matte. I think I'll leave it matte. I might do another one another time and put UV resin on it, but how gorgeous is that? I actually changed my mind in the end and decided to dome it with some UV resin, and I think I do like it glossy. I think I prefer it like that. It really makes everything stand out more. I domed the whole thing, I didn't just make part of it shiny, and I just added a little sort of lace attachment to it. I think I'm going to attach that to the zip on my handbag rather than make it a keyring. But yeah, I love it. It's my favourite piece so far. The trees, I used slightly different shades of green in them all. I used the black UV resin for the wolf, and that was a chameleon powder for the moon, a gold one, and just little silver bits for the stars. I absolutely love that. Let me know what you think. Well, there we have it, all the pieces that we made. I hope this has been of use to you. I know it's aimed at very beginners, so, you know, seasoned resin artists wouldn't be really interested in it, although you can pick up some tips. And it's just basically, I'm self-taught through YouTube, and a lot of people had said they were thinking about starting with resin, so that's why I've made this. I hope it's been helpful for you. I hope it's made you see that even absolute beginners can make gorgeous pieces like that, because you saw how easy it was. It's not difficult. Your only limits is your imagination. You try it. You will have fails. Everybody has fails, but give it a go, and that's how you learn. So please, if you're thinking about it, you don't need to go out and spend a fortune. Get some budget resin from Temu or Amazon, somewhere like that. Get a mould from Temu, definitely, because I don't think I've ever seen a mould less expensive on Amazon than it is on Temu. Quite often they're double, triple the price. If you can, maybe get a couple of moulds so that you've got some spares, so that if you do make up too much resin, there are ways that you can tell pretty much how much resin you're going to need, but I didn't want to go into that in this video. But yeah, that's generally all you need. Something to mix it with, something to put it in your moulds with. Isopropyl alcohol, you get it on Amazon and things, because it has gone up in price than it used to be because of COVID, but yeah, you can get that no bother. The likes of your cotton buds and micro brushes, things like that, are so easy and cheap to pick up. So I really do hope that you have enjoyed this. Please talk to me in the comments below. Let me know if you've still got any questions. There's maybe something that I've not covered, because sometimes you just forget, because you know it, sometimes you forget to actually say it. So if there's anything I've not covered, please just ask. If you have enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. That'll let me know that it is worthwhile making these videos, because the resin tutorial videos are quite lengthy. It does take a lot of time, but I don't mind making it as long as people are enjoying it. So if you hit the thumbs up button, let me know, and also subscribe if you haven't already. I do vlogs and different hauls and things on this channel as well, but if it's only crafts that you're interested in, click the notification bell beside where it says subscribe until it says all. That way you'll be told every time I upload a video, and if it's one that you're not keen on, you don't need to watch it. But if it's a crafty one that you want to watch, then you can. Anyway, I'm going to stop havering now. I think my next one, someone did ask me to do UV resin in an open bezel, so I think that might be my next video. And yeah, if you've got anything else that you would like to see, please let me know. Thanks everyone, I'll see you in our next one. Bye!